There were 1,000 people in the hall, and I said, my name is Chris Smith. I'm the Labour MP for Islington South and Finsbury, and I'm gay.
A group of us in the Gay Liberation Front hit on the idea of holding a gay pride march to challenge that shameful view.
Equality, and for some people in Stonewall, like me, equality was kind of like what you got to as a starting point.
Welcome to The View From Here, the podcast that explores the lives of key people in the LGBTQ+ movement. I'm James.
And I'm Jonathan. We hope you enjoy the podcast. Today we're joined by Stuart Feather, Paul Shaw and Lavinia Co, all veterans of the Bloolips, the radical drag performance collective whose work challenged gender norms and political complacency.
We talk to them about the Bloolips and their tours to Europe and America, and Stuart shares details of his time in the Gay Liberation Front, with stories about the first public protest in the UK at Highbury Fields and protest against the homophobic Festival of Light. It's a wild, joyful ride through the queer theatre, radical drag and subversive storytelling.
This is an adult podcast exploring an often difficult period of LGBTQ+ history. And as such, this series contains discussions of suicide, conversion therapy, homophobia, transphobia, drug use, strong language, and graphic sexual descriptions. It also has a lot of joy and laughs along the way.
It's fantastic to have with us today three members of the radical drag group, the Bloolips, who went on to play a major role as activists over many, many decades and have been at the forefront of radical drag culture for a long time in the UK. And we're absolutely thrilled to have you here to speak with us. And we think this is going to be an incredible podcast. It's the first one we've done with more than one person we're interviewing. So we're excited to have all three of you here.
Buckle up, everybody.
Yeah. So maybe we just get started by each of you introducing yourselves. Tell us a little bit about your early life and where you what got you into performing and activism.
My name is Stuart Feather. I joined the Gay Liberation Front 3 weeks in, as far as I can reckon, but definitely in October 1970 at the LSE. I was immediately captivated by what was being said. There was, 40 people in the room. They were the kind of people I didn't recognise as being gay at all, especially, among the men. They were all sort of long-haired, bearded students that I'd never seen in gay bars. And the women, and they were all in their 20s as well, mainly in their 20s. I was 30 at the time. The women were sort of short hair and maybe a few years older than me. And the thing that really moved me was this woman who was in charge of newcomers and asked us to think about to think about the games we played to keep our sexuality secret at work. Mm-hmm. And that triggered something in me. I think also from what I was gathering, that we should be proud of our sexuality and so on. And I saw all these games I played like a movie strip that just sort of went through my head. And I felt really ashamed about it. And I thought, well, how can I be proud to be gay if I'm so feeling so guilty about what I do that I can't be honest with other people? So that was a start for me.
I'm Lavinia Co and from the Bloolips, and that's my drag name. And my name's Vin Meehan, and I was brought up in Hackney. Irish parents, Catholic. So coming out never knew anything about it at school, didn't realise what hormonal changes I was going through. The boys alienating you, you didn't know what was going on. And then one day you sort of found your way and thought, my God, the back of Liverpool Street Station, having a wank with someone. And you go, oh, wow, oh dear, this is pretty real. So from that,
Very real.
yeah. So it's that sort of coming from absolute not knowing anybody whatsoever, isolated, scared, thinking of it as a disease, not knowing anything about it and going, oh, wow, bit by bit. So that's sort of the beginning of some form of activism. Is going to a cottage, the toilet, is it activist?
Before or after the wank at the back of Liverpool Street Station, did you have a word for that? Did you know the word homosexual? It's probably pre the use of the word gay, I guess. But was there a vocabulary that you had that you could identify yourself with?
Well, just you're queer.
Yeah.
Which was like, a bad word. It's just dirty. There's the queer fellow with the Irish, and the oddity of it. There's something like that. But finding two girls from school were being nurses and they had magazines from educational. And I thought, my God, this is Don Juan. Don Juan loves a lot of women. Oh, I love women. I think they're great. But it wasn't happening in my, growing up. Mm-hmm. There was no passion. So sometimes this word homosexual turned up and you go, oh, my God, what is this? It's an alien thing to me entirely. I didn't have a clue. So it's going from that absolute starkness of life before coming along to gay liberation, eventually working in the theatre as a dresser and going up GLF, finding the GLF, couldn't believe what an open door was happening. Hundreds of people in Notting Hill Gate that were completely all different kinds of people. It was unbelievable. And as a hippie coming out, as well, the whole idea of what you were wearing, the whole beginning of health food, the planet, so many ideas. Never mind women's liberation, men's liberation, gay liberation. But anyway.
So my name's Paul Shaw, and I also have been in the Bloolips for quite a while, some while ago now, but under the name Precious Pearl. And, I suppose it started for me, this may be going too far back, but anyway, in Australia, I was kind of packed off to Australia by my parents when I was about 18. I thought it was my idea at the time, but only recently I realized that I was prompted to go. But anyway, I went to Australia and I was just kind of wandering around because I was obviously too much trouble. And I ended up wandering around Tasmania, apart from any other places. And I met this American surfer called Fred. And I hadn't had any sexual experiences at all when I was 18. And, cause I'd just been far too terrified to even kind of, contemplate whether I was this, that or the other. And then he jumped on top of me one morning, when we were in Melbourne, which was wonderful. And suddenly, everything fell into place. I thought suddenly I know why, like who I am or something. It's like, this is why it's like it is. But anyway, from there, he was, all the young people were wandering around Australia at that time. So I thought I might meet him again if I went to Sydney. So I went to Sydney and I met somebody who I lived with for several years there. And around about that time, it was the beginning of gay lib in Australia. So what was his name? Dennis Altman. You remember his?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's Dennis Altman who had this rather fabulously attractive boyfriend and stuff anyway. And I kind of met them very fleetingly at this party in a university in Sydney. And so, I was, that was the beginning of it for me, that awareness that there was this thing of kind of beginnings of a gay movement and stuff. And eventually I came back to London to go to art school, and I did art school and did those things. And, did a few fairly conventional things to sort of get my career going as a theatre designer. But then I met Bet through Stewart and, and ended up living with Bet. Basically I was breaking up with my boyfriend and I went to see Stewart and I was saying I really needed somewhere to live. And did he know if anybody had a room to let? And Bet came by. Do you remember that? When Bet came by, yes. And he'd just been burgled. He was in this flat, which had been taken over by the Housing Trust, which was all completely falling apart. They put up the scaffolding outside for essential repairs and everybody got burgled. So he was freaked out and he had this big rambling flat. So anyway, I went to live with him there. He was very strict when I first started living with him. He said to me, the first time that he came round to Stewart's, and, you know, found us there. And I, you know, realized I was looking for that. He said, well, you can come and stay with me. And, you know, I got sat on this kind of kitchen bar stool. And he said, the first time I have to clean up after you in the bathroom, that's it, you're out. And so anyway, that's how it all started. And then one Sunday, you know, it was that kind of moment when it was, you know, it felt, you know, one was jumping into bed with lots of different people like we all do when we're young and all of that. And it's all terribly exciting. So, and I didn't think very much of it, to be absolutely honest. You know, one morning I jumped into bed with Bet and we had, you know, the morning in bed, which was great. And, you know, and then we carried on doing the things we were doing. We were both seeing other people, you know, and then gradually it became more and more like we were sort of a couple. But Bet had obviously been with Stewart in the early gay movement. I think he joined a little bit later than you, didn't he?
A few months later. Yes.
Yeah. So
Christmas.
Bet, and, you know, and Bet was quite an extraordinary kind of person. He was, you know, he and John Church were the first professional you know, equity actors, I think, to come out, to my knowledge, you know, and it may well be that Bet was like the first one to make it plain. And that's why he adopted the name Betty, so that everybody would know that he was gay from the first introduction. And he adopted it then as his professional name, you know. So anyway, we lived together. He started the Bloolips and the Bloolips went on tour. They came back from the first tour and, you know, they'd had a really, I don't know, would you, I don't know, well, you were on that first tour, wasn't it? So it was really hard. And when, you know, they were sleeping wrapped up in the backdrop beside the motorway and that sort of thing. And you were on that tour as well, weren't you? And so when they got back to London, the group broke up and I was pursuing all these other design things while Bet was doing this. And we were, you know, having lots of nice sex and all of that. And anyway, when he came back to London, the group pretty well sort of fell apart. A bunch of people left and he'd already taken out all these contracts to go back to Germany on what proved to be the first Bloolips tour to actually make any money, which was the glue which held the whole company together because we couldn't earn any money in this country. And so he had to get together a bunch of people very quickly. So he's, you know, he just told me to get my tap shoes on and sort of, you know, become a Bloolip. So that's how it happened, you know. So I was just sort of thrown into the middle of it all, which was an extraordinary experience, you know, but it was wonderfully exciting. And then,
I mean, I just want to stick on early, like just for saying before we move on to the Bloolips, because, you know, you lived in Australia. Did you find Australia to be a much more liberal place than here from a kind of gay perspective, or was it you didn't have so much experience here by the time you went over?
It was very kind of liberating in Australia in the sense that it's very kind of opened out. I mean, it's an Anglo-Saxon culture, but it's in the sun. And somehow or another, it just seems to create this whole atmosphere of sort of, you know, cheap champagne and orange juice and everybody having fun. You know what I mean? Endless brunch parties. And, you know, you go to a party, I don't know, you know, kind of 11 o'clock in the morning and you'd start drinking and then, you know, you'd end up going to somebody's late night party and you realize you spent the whole time going from one party to another and, you know, at 3 o'clock in the morning you were still drinking and then you got up and went to work the next day. It was extraordinary, but it was very opened out. It was very sort of free and easy, it felt. I mean, there obviously must have been a lot of, you know, kind of anti-gay prejudice. But I mean, going to this event at the university and then living with who I did live with in Australia. I mean, he was older than me. So it was a fairly old fashioned kind of set in a way. I mean, it was all these sort of television executives and, you know, they all called each other these names like Trina and the Duchess and all of this kind of stuff. And, you know, and, but they were very mad queens, you know, and they were pretty out in their work, even before, you know, this beginning of Gay Lib. And there was a very famous drag ball, which was held in Sydney. And it was absolutely massive. And all of these queens would come in these incredible outfits and stuff like that. And it was, so I don't know, there's something sort of more opened out generally about the kind of feeling in Australia, I think. There's a great feeling of airiness about it, which you don't get in this country. It's much more kind of nailed down. So for me, coming from a family which was pretty heavy and intense, it was just extraordinary, you know. It was amazing. But I was glad to come back to this country because it had the course that I wanted to do. Right. But it was wonderful in Australia. Yeah, it was great.
Stuart, I don't think we heard much about your early life in your intro, which I would love to hear a bit more about. When did you first, I guess, realize you were gay? When did you talked about not being out at work? I'd like to explore a bit more of your early life there.
Well, when I was about 15, I discovered the cottages in York, and then that led on to me meeting John Chesterman, and he was 16 and I was 16 and he was 19, and we met in this loo next door to the Labour Exchange in York, and we did it just once, and then I think both of us wished we'd made some arrangement, and we hadn't. But I bumped into him in this department store in York that Christmas. This was in September when I met him. And he was there with his mother and his sister. But he managed to get her to make some excuse and disappear for a few moments. And he came down into the glassware department, I remember. And we made a date very swiftly. And that led to 4 years of a relationship, which eventually became open, obviously. And he was studying architecture at Leeds and got a job when he qualified in Doncaster and moved to Huddersfield. So I managed to get a job because I was a clerk on, I had been, I must say, become an apprentice engineer. Not that I wanted that. I wanted to go to art school, but my parents wouldn't let me. And then I found myself at technical college and then on the shop floor. And the day the Wolfenden report came out in the newspaper, John and I agreed to meet at lunchtime in the Minster Gardens in York. And we were both to collect newspapers that morning, say 2 from one newsagent, without trying to raise any suspicion about the reason for it, and a couple more in another, and so on. And then we met up and went through all these papers and putting them into piles, for or against, and stuff like that. And 2 apprentice engineers came along on their bikes and saw us and saw the papers. And when I got back to the factory after lunch, the entire factory were waiting for me. And it was just, they were roaring with hatred and disapproval, and, and the foreman did absolutely nothing about it. Wow. And the immediate effect was that I was reduced from this milling machine that I was operating very efficiently and put onto this weedy little machine of which there was an operative. And so there was really no work for the 2 of us on this one machine. So I got fed up with that and broke my apprenticeship and got a job with British Railways. So I was able to transfer to Huddersfield. And there we continued as a couple, but met lots of people. We first lived in the town's theatrical boarding house, which was kind of nice and free and easy.
So that would have been 1957?
Yes. 1958.
58.
Yeah.
I think lots of young people today, and one of the reasons why we want to do this is so that people who are of a generation that have never experienced what you describe understand where we've come from. Lavinia, there's a fantastic interview with you on BBC Sounds, and you very briefly talk about, you don't go into detail, and I'm hoping I can bring you into some more detail here, about what life was like for out gay people, or any gay people, in the 1960s and 70s. And I wonder if you can share some of your experiences of that time.
Yeah, in the 60s, there was no out, you're right. I mean, by 68 and 69, There was a liberality going around, and there was the beginning of starting to discover places. You thought, oh, that's Liverpool Street toilet. Oh, that's working in the theatre. Oh, these are gay people. That's interesting. I've never met any gay people.
Was that true also all the time that you were at the place? Or would you?
And then
when
I went to dance school, but you see, we'd had gay liberation, and that really turned me on, because to gay liberation, I went to teacher training college, and I'd had that experience in the gay lib and working in the theatre. When I went to teacher training college, I realised that they were all like homophobe, nice Catholics from Liverpool, and I about-faced. And after about 6 weeks, but I had this grant. I couldn't believe it. I had a grant to go there. And so I went and thought, sod it, I'm a butterfly now. I'm a grasshopper. It's okay. Because life was so like on the edge. You didn't know where you were going. I mean, I'd been completely slaughtered in the sense that I wasn't going to be a teacher teaching drama and art or something. But I thought, go the other way. Fuck it. Go and do theatre or art, because you believe in it, rather than going to teacher training. Anyway, so never mind. Oh God, I got out of there, and I managed to get a job as the dresser again. I couldn't believe it. I was living in the West. Coming from, when you think of, up there in Bayswater, all the bedsits, the way the homosexuals were in society, it was very hidden. It was the same with Bet. Bet's first, his homes where you were living. Gosh, what to explain? The dance thing was also like, oh, no male-female role-playing. Whatever that mean. What does that mean? What the hell? Oh, we've all got a body. We can dance. We can all dance. It's not about, But when you get into being a little bit feminine as a dancer, or not being able to do the butch things that dancers could, so sometimes there's a hellish thing there. I think dance gave me the ability to sort of say, no, I'm okay. I can stand up. The dance teacher once said, it's okay to have an ego. And so it's really psychological. So no, it was the beginning of being able to stand up, because sometimes that gay oppression really makes you withdraw all your self stuff that you do to yourself. No, finding that there was answers. The other one was doing co-counselling and discovering co-counselling. That really helped. Realizing that we scream and shout and cry, and we need to have places that are safe to talk. It's like counselling. So there was many things, you understood about being gay. That was a major thing in your life. But another thing was working class. Another one was understanding how women are. You go, oh, how do I treat? So that was the therapeutic side. Never mind then going on to continue with getting involved with the Bloolips, because that was after the dance school, there was about a year of experimental dance, but coming from all my experience of working in kind of political theatre too, and discovering all this getting along with Betty and realising, well, we didn't do the gay lib as far as being a drag queen goes on stage, and where it isn't all about sexism and misogyny, and, we play with the ideas of the commune and theatrically improvise.
So you mentioned the commune. We talk about still blowing the lid. So could you tell us a little bit about commune life, what that was like, what was behind it?
What was behind it? Well, what was behind it was the politics of gay liberation, which was socialism. Bet was one of the first people that I remember distinctly coming to gay lib. And it was, the LSE was closed for Christmas, which is where we used to meet in one of the classrooms there. And it was moved to the arts lab. And Bet came along to that. And I remember during the meeting, this Queen sort of spoke up. You were at his funeral, so you heard me telling the story of how this bar queen was saying, what do you mean gay lib is different? It's just like any other gay bar, we're all cruising, aren't we? And Bet jumped up in a fury and said, you you know,
You stupid fucking queen. That's what you said at the funeral, which was one. You stupid fucking queen.
That's what I was trying to get.
Brought the whole thing to a complete stop. Did I just hear that in a funeral?
And he said, I've been in every bar in London and no one's ever talked like this before. You stupid fucking queen. Can't you see this horse has got a chance? It was an absolutely marvellous, really gutsy reply to this guy. So that really impressed me, obviously, because I always remembered it. It was one of the first things. And then gradually, as weeks went on, one met more people, and eventually I made friends with Mick Belston, who was about 5 years older than me, and he came from a family of Bristol dockers who were all socialists, and he had 2 brothers who were gay and 2 sisters that were gay out of a family of 8, I think. So remarkable.
Something in the water.
Definitely. Something in the air of Bristol. So he had a lovely flat with his boyfriend in Barnes, and people used to go along there. And Bet came along there as well. And many other people that I became friendly with, Nicholas Bramble. And generally on a Saturday, and Andrew Lumsden, of course, and we'd drop acid and trip together, and on a sort of regular basis. And Mick's, would, from his point of view, from that socialist point of view, was talking about, we were discussing the Maoists, Aubrey and David, and what they were saying, and then other people as well. So we were sort of, before we, obviously wasn't doing that on acid, but I mean, before we dropped the acid, we were, Mick was sort of, because the media workshop of GLF was, used to meet in his flat, so the men and the women, so he could, he could analyse the situation and what people were into and so forth. Things like the Maoists saying there won't be any liberation for 200 years. And we were saying, and we were thinking, well, why do we have to wait 200 years? We're here now. We're trying to do it now. So let's do it.
So, Stuart, one thing, why was it that the early commune was very much about radical drag? And why was that very different from some of the other stuff that was happening on in the gay movement at that time? Because it was very built around radical drag, the commune, wasn't it? Which was actually a space you occupied in Notting Hill, wasn't it?
Yes. And the major difference between the men and the women in GLF was that the men were incredibly sexist and misogynistic. And this group of us were all trying to become aware of where we were going wrong with the women, where we were being sexist or misogynistic towards them, and kind of going through our heads and trying to sort things out. It got sort of mixed up with the drag thing as well, because it was all very well wearing a badge and saying Gay Liberation Front, but that's kind of, the response was kind of on an impersonal level. What is the Gay Liberation? What does it stand for? It was nothing about, the conversation never reached the point where someone said, well, why do you feel oppressed, and so on.
What first prompted you to kind of, if you like, get into a frock? What was going on around you at that time?
The thing was that, in a way, drag was a way of coming out even more, to show it was our response to the badge, really, because there was no question about the response from being in drag. because it was immediately challenging, immediately obvious, because the kind of drag we developed was, it was to express our homosexuality. We weren't pretending to be women. We weren't acting at being women. We weren't making this parody. We felt, if you like, we were being more than acting.
And is that?
But it was to sort of demonstrate that we could be feminine and we could be challenging at the same time.
And is that why it's radical drag? Is that what you mean by the phrase radical drag?
That is radical drag as best as I can define it, yes.
The most obvious thing about it visually is that it's obviously a man in a frock.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no attempt to actually conceal the fact that you were a bloke, but you were wearing feminine things. And you were doing it on the tube going to work, weren't you? And Vet was running a stall on the market and then, and doing all of this. People were astonished.
Yes, and of course it was really challenging within the movement, completely. All the straight men, the reaction against it, and the Maoist and the left as well.
You're letting the side down.
It was challenging, and they couldn't handle it. And so there was, as the movement progressed and all these different extra parliamentary left, sort of the Marxists, the Marxist-Leninists, I mean, all that array of different ideologies, they all started trying to make their mark on GLF and try and force it into these positions and so forth and take over. And there was one after the other. They all tried and they all failed. And we were making the running. And they couldn't bear that.
Right.
And Lavinia, you said that you're letting the side down. Was that let's go back. What drew you to drag?
So, yes, wandering around Notting Hill Gate and seeing people coming out of the commune or getting on the buses and being out and finding that so scary and exhilarating at the same time, that you were having a laugh, that you were moving around, that you were being out just in normal situation. That was. And then, of course, we were wearing beads and trying on makeup, and we had, Bieber was around, and it was fantastic. It was wow. Getting into drag, more, I think, we're getting into the Bloolips. I found that was a safe space to be on stage. But also working the street was the area, being more a street queen too, realizing, when we went to San Francisco in the 80s, I couldn't believe seeing street queens that were wearing slippers and putting a piece of newspaper on the sidewalks that we could sit down and have a chat. It was there was many other areas, going to Amsterdam and seeing shows and different performance groups saying, there's more, wearing drag. God, years of it now.
So you found wearing drag on stage to be a safe space. There's many people that think that would be a kind of terrifying, I suppose, thing to do. Can you remember the first time you ever went on stage in drag?
Yeah, like we did the Ugly Duckling, which was a kind of a collective shared way of putting something together, and we put it on at the Tabernacle and found the boards to stand on and the backdrop and the piano, and we got there. Yes, that was the beginning of really coming out and realizing, yes, we can create something. Coming from the Hot Peaches, we realized, this is possible. Betty gave us that. Betty said, I'm the boss. I'm in charge. We've got collective and shared ideas. We can't do it without people. We had 9 people. It got down to 6 and 7 and then toured. So being safe, you can sometimes, if you're on the street, it's not always that easy to demonstrate or to expostulate ideas. Sometimes in a nightclub, you go, you can be a little bit out. It's kind of safe. This is cabaret. It's a little bit more safer, but they're still talking and you've really got to pull their attention. But on stage, you've got them. Mm-hmm. If they want to come and see a storyline and that you're just naturally yourselves, not trying to be women, not necessarily being clowns. We are intelligent. We do have ideas, but it's light and frothy. It's entertaining. It's a fabulous world being gay, and we're letting you in on our secrets. We're letting you in on our stories, our little silly songs about cruising or.
And the Bloolips had a fantastic European tour and then went to New York. And I know that there are some wonderful stories around that. And I wonder if you would share some of those with us. Because I think a lot of people won't have any experience with a touring radical drag group. They not so much of them anymore.
One of the things that Bet always used to insist when we were on tour was that we got paid cash, which is almost unbelievable now. And we existed in some way a bit like gypsies because we were totally unfunded for most of that 20 years. And which was just extraordinary, actually. And the first reason we started touring in Germany and all around, well, the first move that we made, we got in touch with the Festival of Fools in Amsterdam. And from there, we got sort of pushed around to all of these different venues. There were all of these alternative groups who were doing all kinds of crazy stuff. There was Cunning Stunts and all of these different groups that were doing these amazing things, I think, at that time. And, so it was a wonderful, and you bump into them on the road and all of that. We went around in various sort of beaten up buses and stuff like that. And
these were British groups or these were?
They would be maybe Dutch groups, maybe German groups, right. But the ones we knew were British. Yeah.
But did you all travel abroad because there was a bigger scene there that you could be more open because there was money there?
Well, money.
The money.
There was no money here.
There was money. And Bet had a contact in Amsterdam, one of his previous boyfriends who had a boat in Amsterdam. So that was the first thing. So somehow managed to get people over to Amsterdam, all staying on boats and stuff, and got a booking at the Milky Way, blah, blah, blah. And then from there, we just got started all of these journeys over Europe, and that's when it made some money. But anyway, one of these tours, we've been doing this show, Lust in Space, which was one of our great shows, I have to say. But anyway, we did this tour and we ended up in this hotel room in Hamburg. And Betty had this kind of sort of, this handbag, which was like a clutch bag, which looked like a magazine, one of those sort of old fashioned sort of clutch bags. And that's where he used to keep all of the money. So, we would get a sort of per diem as we were going around. He would share out money and then there would be a share out at the end.
Of what?
And, of what was there. But anyway, we decided in this Hamburg hotel that we were going to share out the money. And this was a bag that Betty had lost almost several times on the tour without us even realizing that was where he was keeping all of the money. Anyway, we counted out this money in about sort of 5 different denominations, kroners and Deutsch, because it was before the European Union. And there was a fantastic amount of money there. We couldn't believe it. And, and then Bet said, well, I can either share this out or we can go to New York. And we, again, like with him having some friends in Amsterdam with boats, we had a few friends in New York. So there were a few contacts and other people in the group, new people and stuff like that. Anyway, we got to New York and, we were, we sent all of our stuff on. We arrived as tourists. We sent all of our stuff on in trunks and, we got there and we all got little jobs because we had no bookings and stuff. And Bet was going around to all of these, different theatres and saying, will you take us on and give us a gig and all of that stuff. And had a few contacts because he'd worked with the Hot Peaches from New York for a short while. And, I must sort of bring in another story to this because I just love it so much. But anyway, he'd approached Charles Ludlam at the Theatre for the Ridiculous and, to make a meeting. And he thought he'd made a real contact and Charles Ludlam had agreed to see him. And, so he called Charles Ludlam and then at the end of the conversation, he said, so how will I recognize you? He said they made this appointment to meet in this cafe near the Theatre of the Ridiculous. And Charles Ludlam said, well, I've got a mop of red hair and I'm hung like a horse. And Bet thought, well, that's a little bit of a weird thing to say, but hey, we're in New York, you know what I mean? And it's kind of okay. So anyway, Bet went along to this meeting. And of course, we still hadn't had a single booking in New York. And, no Charles, nobody with a mop of red hair, let alone hung like a horse came in. So, Bet, he finally realized, he'd just been made a fool of. Anyway, I'd say it's barely a couple of months, maybe 3 months later, there was a party being held in New York for us. at a big loft space. We were the toast of the town, they say. But anyway, we'd had this fantastic success in New York from getting a one booking. We got a centre spread in the Village Voice. We got a booking on 2nd Avenue, the Orpheum Theatre, blah, blah, blah. It was amazing. We had to go back to London to get proper visas. Everything just took off incredibly.
So radical drag was something the Americans could really get on board with.
Well, they had their own versions of that, but they didn't have quite the polish, I would say. I mean, and also I think there was something about the British humour that in some way we were sending ourselves up, which is a very kind of English thing to do. And I think that very much the kind of humour that was going on very much in New York was queens who were sort of faster and sharper. I mean, very much like, to my Joan Rivers or so. She's faster and quicker than you are. Can you catch up? We were far more stupid than the audience. And I think New Yorkers found that an incredible relief. They suddenly didn't have to try and be on top of it. They were sort of ahead of us and we were trying to catch up with them. And I think it just turned it completely around because it was very English kind of humour. But anyway, there was, so 3 months after this appointment with Charles Lytle, there was this party being held in a big loft space by this guy, Randy Gilberti, who was a big socialite in New York and had one of those wonderful loft spaces where the elevator comes right up into the room, and all that. Anyway, the elevator came up into the room. Bet was by the doorway with Randy Gilberti, and the elevator doors opened, and there was this little short fat man came out with a bald head. And Bet said to Randy, "Who's that?" And he said, "That's Charles Ludlam." And Bet just went absolutely ballistic and gave it to him. And he was so, he was just absolutely mortified and incredibly, but, you just felt it's one of those moments, don't be nasty to them on the way up because you might meet them on the way down. But it was just an extraordinary, I mean, he had no idea that, 3 months after he tried to make a fool of Bet, really, he was nobody as far as he was concerned. Suddenly Bet was all over the fucking newspapers, the Bloolips and, but we did have a marvelous time there. It was really exciting. It was great to suddenly do that, and out of nothing, and to find that those things in New York, they last for a season, if you like. I think with us, it lasted probably 2 or 3 seasons, didn't it?
We when every time we went back through the 80s, we gave a lift to the downtown scene in New York. It was a very theatrical, so many different kinds of arts and artists. But it was a lift because it was the beginning of AIDS, and that's probably where we got some of it. Yeah. It was the 80s, 81 we went back. Yes, the frivolous silliness, but also sometimes the punch underneath. And it was a group work. It wasn't, Betty was the star often, but this is sending up the star as well. It was brilliant bit of writing. Lots of tap dancing and musical. It was phenomenal in a way.
And there were some great players in the Bloolips. And Danny was fantastic. You were fantastic. We were all wonderful. You know what I mean?
Why was it called the Bloolips? Where did the name come from?
When we were in New York, a friend of mine said that there was a line in MASH that one of the characters had been giving an Eskimo a blowjob.
The only other one I heard.
So I don't know whether that's true or not because I haven't watched MASH all the way through.
That's like Lavinia's got an alternative.
The train of thought: hot peaches, hot lips, blue lips. Oh, but spell it BLOLIPS, Bloolips, Bloolips, blah blah blah, BLOOLIPS.
Can I just add to what Paul was saying? One reason why we got to Amsterdam, the COC had heard of us and invited us to go to Amsterdam and play the Ugly Duckling in Fondle Park for the Amsterdam Gay Pride, the first Amsterdam Gay Pride. We'd actually thought that we would do the show, first of all, for the London Gay Pride. But the people controlling that turned us down. They were all, ex-GLFers
Were these part of the people you made enemies of?
The left, in inverted commas. Yes, and so this was part of their revenge on us. So we were free to go to Amsterdam. And Bet had already been in the February of that year with Danny to Amsterdam to the Melkweg and tried to get a gig with them. And, of course, they said no, sight unseen. So as soon as the Fundle Park gig came up, Bet immediately, I don't know, probably phoned them, I would think, and said, we're going to play in Fundle Park for Amsterdam Gay Pride. And so they sent...
Just asserted.
Yeah. And so they sent someone along from the management, and that's how we got the gig with the Melkweg. Yeah.
And thinking about those early prides, were the two of you at that first pride?
Oh, yes.
Can you tell us a bit about that and what that was like? And
it was great. It was fun. We met in Hyde Park and had a sort of party, and then we came together and lined up and started off. There were so many police surrounding us that it was difficult to see the people on the pavement, and equally difficult for them to see us. But it did create quite a furore.
And so brave to do at that time as well.
So 72 was first Gay Pride, yes. But what have we done before that?
27th November 1970 was the Gay-In at Highbury Fields.
That was Highbury Fields, yes.
Let's talk about the Kiss-In, the Gay-In at Highbury Fields, 27th of November 1970, which is reported as really the first gay protest, collective protest in the UK.
That's right. Yes. Openly advertised by lesbian and gay people. It was actually, and we haven't mentioned him yet, Anthony Gray, who single-handedly slogged away as secretary of the Homosexual Law Reform Society, which was founded in 1958. And he became head of the Albany Trust. He was the man that went on television when he finally got the BBC to allow him to give a talk on homosexuality and the need for reform and change of law. And they did it with him in a studio that was so dark that you could hardly see him at all, because it would be absolutely outrageous to put an openly homosexual on British television. And the second time, I'm not quite sure which way around it was, but one time they filmed him from the back.
Oh, wow.
God.
Gosh.
Was that because he didn't want to reveal his identity?
No.
I didn't think so. It's because the BBC didn't want to.
The BBC didn't want, they thought they couldn't possibly show a homosexual.
But they were happy to interview him and presumably talk about his about the campaign, the reforms, the law reforms.
Yes.
But they weren't. They felt it was a step too far
to actually show his face.
Wow.
Yes.
Because wasn't the whole attitude? Lord Arran was very involved with it, wasn't it?
Well,
but then somebody said this thing about, we mustn't be too outrageous or too kind of.
Yes.
What was that?
That was eventually, Anthony Gray found Leo Absey, the colourful Welsh MP, who in turn found Lord Arran, who was this, sort of Scottish lord, eccentric, from an eccentric family. And part of his speech in the House of Lords, when the bill was being turned into, an act, was saying that, he said he quoted Oscar Wilde as saying, the road ahead will be long and bloody, and he sort of acknowledged the fact that it had been, and so on. But then he had this caution that he hoped that there would be no demonstration or outrageous behaviour which could possibly make the Lords and Commons regret that they had done what they were about to do, which was to make it lawful, or to publish the Sexual Offences Act, and to take away the gross indecency law. So we all had to behave ourselves. So along comes gay liberation 3 years later, making a public demonstration of themselves.
And that gay in Highbury Fields, what was the response to it? Yeah.
The connection was that Anthony Gray and his lover, Eric Thompson, were in the meeting, and Eric Thompson, the proposal from the left was that we should go to the American embassy and demonstrate against their ban on homosexuals visiting America, or going to America, that was in the visa application form. And I thought, that's the business of American gays to sort out. And it seemed to me it was like something to do with the defeat of the left at Grosvenor Square in the anti-Vietnam War demonstrations. And Eric Thompson's idea was that we should go to Highbury Fields and demonstrate there against the police arrest of Louis Eakes, who was the chair of the Young Liberals who'd been caught cottaging. And that's obviously the one we went for. And so that occurred. And I was reviewing that just recently in a little essay I did for Andrew Lumsden for the exhibition of his paintings that took place at Vogue Fabric in Stoke Newington about in February of this year. And I'd been thinking to include, as a way of explaining Labouchere and his gross indecency amendment and the 1885 Offences Against the Persons Act, and I was so I started off with Henry VIII and the Buggery Act of 1533 and worked forward. And for some reason, I went to look at John Smith and James Pratt, who were the last two men in England to be hung for the crime of sodomy in 1835. And I discovered that was exactly to the date 135 years earlier than the Highbury Fields demonstration.
Wow.
No, I haven't published that yet, so I trust you with that information.
Well, we won't be airing this for a little while, so I think you're good.
And what was the thing that they did at the action about all that stuff they were doing in the bushes?
Oh,
and
yes.
What was that, which was quite fun, wasn't it?
Well, it was, yes. I mean, it started off with, there was the cottage, and so we were all doing lots of chanting, sort of, give us a G, give us an A, give us a Y, what does that spell? Gay. And what is gay? Good. And what is also gay? Angry. And we were sort of repeating that and one or two others that people threw in and so forth. And then we moved off to the centre of the fields and lit candles, and then the GLF demands were read out. And then after that, we sort of dispersed into the bushes and lit cigarettes and used the tip of the cigarette to sort of invite the cruisers or to signify your interest in in a liaison with one of the other people. So, which is what the police said Louis had done, and the reason why he was arrested. Well, they'd seen him come out of the cottage and go into the fields and light up a cigarette and join the rest of the cruisers there. So that we did that, yes. And then after that, we went for a drink at the nearest pub on Highbury Corner, which happened to be called the Cock Inn.
What was the aftermath of this? What was the public response?
The only newspaper that turned up was the Times, and Andrew Lumsden was the business editor of the Times, and he went to work the following morning and discovered the Gay Liberation Front and was there the following week and became the first out journalist in the world.
Wow.
And a leading figure in gay liberation. And he died 2 years ago, last October. Yeah. And we are the beneficiaries of his.
Absolutely.
Stuart, you published the Gay Liberation Front manifesto. Did you republish the Gay Liberation Front?
Yes.
There's still copies.
There are still.
Is it online?
No.
No. Well,
You can get them at the Bishopsgate Institute.
Oh.
And there is a copy in Queer Britain, the museum in London.
Yes, that's right. You can buy it at Gaze the Word Bookshop
And
anyway.
you should buy it at Gaze the Word Bookshop everywhere, because everyone should go to Gaze the Word Bookshop. It's brilliant. There is another protest that the GLF was quite famous for, and that was the protest of the Festival of Light.
Oh, yes.
And I know Bet was at that, I believe.
Yeah.
Were the two of you at the Festival of Light protest?
Yes.
So I don't think anyone who's listening may recognize that. So it would be lovely to hear about what that was and what we did.
Right. Well, there was two missionaries, a husband and wife, Peter and Janet Hill, who'd been missionaries in India, and they came back to London or to England in, I suppose, about 1970, and were absolutely opposed at the filth and depravity that Britain had sunk into since they left. They were determined to do something about it, and they were kind of stars of the evangelical fundamentalist movement. And Mary Whitehouse, who was with her Television and Viewers and Listeners Association, and Lord Longford, who was a Labour cabinet member and a right-wing Roman Catholic, who used to pray for Myris Hindley, the Moor's murderer, in her cell, and Malcolm Muggeridge, who was a right-wing newspaper columnist, and
Cliff Richard.
And they had a committee, and they call themselves, the evangelicals and Peter Hill and his wife, they decided to have a festival of light. And then Whitehouse picked up on that, and with their money and connections, they kind of took over not the organising, the Christians were quite capable of that, but they took over and could promote it sort of nationally. And so that's what they did. And they decided that the target would be homosexuals, and also they wanted to recriminalise homosexuality and abortion 4 years after they'd been decriminalised. John Chesterman was the guy who saw immediately the importance of this and the danger it could pose. So he organised with street theatre, of which I was part, and a counter sort of demonstration. And he persuaded Janet Phillips, one of his friends, who was about, 22 or 23, quite a young girl, a young woman anyway, to approach the Festival of Light as a devout Christian and get a job in their offices. And she succeeded to such an extent that she had access to tickets for the inaugural meeting in Methodist Central Hall, Westminster. And then the Festival of Light itself would be in Hyde Park with a rally in Trafalgar Square and a march to Hyde Park for the Festival of Light. And they brought Cliff Richards on board the Festival of Light for youth appeal. And there were Danish pornographers and all sorts of weirdos who were attending the inaugural meeting. So, and for the arrangement for the buses, what Janet did there under John's direction was to send out last minute a change of location of the parking spaces for the buses coming from all over the country down to London, bringing the faithful to the rally. And she changed the timings and the locations, so the locations were now all in outer boroughs of London, and some of the timings were actually 6 p.m., which was the time that the Festival of Light in Hyde Park finished. So there was a massive disruption there. So we were able to get into the inaugural meeting, and we were dotted all round. There was, I don't know how many little activist groups, about, I would say, 15, I think, altogether.
Each with a different role.
Each with a different role. And Chesterman told each group what people in front of them would be doing, and then it was up to them to choose their moment, to do their thing. So only each group knew the one earlier than them, and they were all sworn to secrecy. But we all knew the first one, which was slow hand clapping. So after Peter Hill had done his opening speech and so forth, and there's wild applause, and as it dies away, you hear these slow hand clapping, so people are going sort of, it just put an edge under things.
Were each group thrown out as they did?
As they did their thing, yes. Right. They were stewards. They all looked like cricketers to me. And they all had that little Methodist bag, a sort of green enamel sort of thing with the lamp, the burning lamp.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, they were the tough guys.
What actually happened? What things happened during the occasion?
And so the first real thing was the release of mice, and there were screams of horror, and people trying to get out of the pews, and others standing on the pews, and all snorting with disgust and horror, these mice running around all over the place. So that really, sort of stopped it.
And presumably you could release the mice without being caught. Who did it?
Well, Well, you could, because they were all in boxes. So, and it was on the ground floor. There was a balcony as well. There's a balcony in the building. And I was up there with lots of other people too. So it's quite easy to release the mice onto the floor. And then, there we are. Someone looked down and freaked out like everybody else. And then there was a group of nuns who were next, and they sort of filed out of their pews and walked very solemnly to the front of the church, turned round, lifted up their skirts and can down the aisle, screaming their heads off, shrieking like mad banshees. And some of them didn't get caught until they got right to the other end of the chapel. Yes. And it went on like that.
The banner over the...
Oh, yes, the youth group threw a banner over the front of the balcony, and daubed in big red letters was "Cliff for Queen." And of course, with all these interruptions, it was marvellous for the mice. The organist had gone off to do something, maybe gone to the loo or something, and the choir mistress it took her several minutes to kind of pull herself together to rush out and find the organist to come back and start, sort of rally the crowd with the next hymn kind of thing. And so this was happening every time. So every time there was a disruption, well, the organist came back, of course, so he didn't move again. He was waiting to the next one. Yes.
The Queen that had been saved.
Oh yes, there was somebody that said, "I've been saved." This is.
Oh yes. There was Michael James, and he was a solo act in drag, dressed in a sort of coffee lace dress that he was very proud of, and a wig. I always imagined he had a great cartwheel hat on, but he swears he didn't. But anyway, Malcolm Muggeridge came on and started, sort of denouncing homosexuals, evil, this and all that, sort of nonsense. And Michael screamed out, "Ours have been saved. Ours have seen the face of the Lord. Glory, glory. Hallelujah, I've been saved." And the whole place fell silent because they thought it had really happened for a minute. And then they began to, oh no. And then the steward, he was right up on the back row of the balcony, and the stewards approached from both sides, but he was quick. He grabbed Peter Flannery, who had his carry bag. What he'd done was put on his drag as everybody was standing up singing during he and Peter Flannery. They managed to escape the stewards and got right down to the front of the balcony. And Michael was repeating himself all the way until he was grabbed, and hauled out. So yes, that was extraordinary.
And what was your role? What
I was one of 4 or 5 members of the Ku Klux Klan. So when it was our turn, we put on the pointed hat and agreed with everything that Malcolm Muggeridge was saying about homosexuals. We were saying, yes, burn them like faggots. Yes, hang them. Hanging's too good for them. Crucify them.
Wow! Oh wow! And did you get swiftly ejected?
Oh, very swiftly, and thumped once or twice.
Oh really? Oh no!
As we were sent down the stairs.
Was anyone arrested? The role.
There was no arrests.
Okay.
No, that was a remarkable thing. There was nearly an arrest outside because I don't know who, we'd all arranged to meet in a pub round the corner in Westminster. But they'd encountered, some police, a couple of policemen. I can't remember the reason for the policeman stopping them, or maybe he didn't. Maybe they were just got a bit sort of because what they were saying to the policeman was, "We've just been inside there, and we've been told to love the police. If Jesus loves us, why don't you?" And one of them was too bold and kissed this policeman, and he was so surprised, his head jerked backwards and his helmet flew off. And you know, he suddenly he'd lost all his authority. But of course, his mate sort of, you know, was there as well. So the helmet was retrieved. But they went off muttering, "Yeah, Jesus must love you." You know, the fucking.
Well, I was at Methodist Central Hall about 3 weeks ago at the Off West End Awards. And I thought about this moment because I had known about it, because the Off West End Awards was hosted by a drag queen. And I thought, look how far we have come. There's a great story about how you chose your name, which I'd love for you to share if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah, we were in the hippie times, and Fergus decided to give up and go back to the land in Ireland, and managed to get unemployment and get a little cottage in the middle of nowhere. And we went over, me and Alan, to visit, and we had 3 weeks there. And at some point, because there was no lights, it was candles and cooked by the fire. It was very, a few vegetables in the garden. It was, anyway, going back to the land, the whole idea. No, so we were mucking around one day, and Fergus became Fanula, and Alan became Lady Alicia Bracknell. She was, Alan, and I was Lavinia. And I said, Lavinia's, it's too posh. So I put co-off on the end, because that was current at the time as well. So, yes, that's how Lavinia came along.
And you're still performing?
Yeah, I'm still performing a little bit here and there. Yes, archiving, going through stuff, trying to relegate this to the world. And I need help. I need psychiatric help.
No, we all.
I need money. It's a long process, but we're getting there. Bishopsgate has been really good.
They're so brilliant at Bishopsgate.
So I guess what is your message to people that didn't live through that struggle, that didn't have to experience the severity of homophobia that you saw, the struggles that you went through, and that almost maybe forget that we're still in a bit of a fight and a struggle? What is your message to the next generation about this fight?
I think, coming out of the 70s, 60s, 70s, it was quite a liberal, we'll say quite liberal. But then you get into the 80s with Maggie Thatcher, and a complete reversal of the way we were going. So we really had a right-wing backlash. And so developing and keeping going, Section 28 occurred. So this 80s was quite traumatic in a way. And yet as Bloolips, performing on stage was a way of continuing on with another kind of exploration of liberation. So that for me was a big thing, was to be able to perform and, show a kind of way. Yes.
Well, we are really humbled by the fact that you've come and spoken to us today. And I think that the messages that the three of you have shared with us are ones that are just these beacons of light and should remain beacons of light in a time that is getting a bit darker. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
Thank you for listening to The View From Here. Of course, there's a lot of politics in any movement, but the political views you've heard across the series don't necessarily reflect the views of the podcast.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and leaving a review, as well as sharing the word on social media. Join us next time for more personal stories from the front lines of LGBTQ+ history.